Jasmine Crockett stared at her reflection in the mirror of her downtown office. At 42 years old, she had achieved what many thought impossible. The golden morning light poured through the large windows, illuminating her confident smile. Today marked her third year in Congress, representing a district that had once seemed beyond her reach. She straightened her navy blazer and adjusted her pearl necklace, gifts she had bought herself after winning the election. The office walls were lined with photos of Jasmine shaking hands with important people, cutting ribbons and speaking at podiums. Each picture told the story of her rise to power. Jasmine had not come from money or connections. She grew up in a small house in Dallas where her mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Their neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't prosperous either. As a young girl, Jasmine would watch political speeches on their old television and tell her mother, "One day, that will be me." Her path hadn't been easy. She worked her way through college with night jobs at diners and call centers. Law school had been even harder, with mountains of debt piling up as she pushed forward. But Jasmine was smart enough to know that. In politics, being clever was only part of the game. You also needed money and friends in the right places. "Ms. Crockett, your 9 o'clock is here," said her assistant through the office intercom. Jasmine pressed the button. "Send him in, please." The door opened and in walked Greg Peterson, a tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit. He owned several construction companies and had been one of her earliest supporters. "Greg, always good to see you," Jasmine said, extending her hand. Greg shook it firmly. "The pleasure is mine, Congresswoman. You're looking well. Power suits you." They sat down in the comfortable chairs by the window, away from her desk. This wasn't an official meeting. Nothing that would appear on her calendar. "I trust you received my message about the West Side project?" Greg asked, keeping his voice low despite them being alone. "I did. The committee votes next week." "It's looking positive," Jasmine replied. Greg nodded, satisfied. Good. And the other matter we discussed?" "The zoning change? I've spoken with the right people. It should move forward without any problems." "Excellent." Greg reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He placed it on the small table between them. "This is just a token of appreciation for your continued support of local business development." Jasmine didn't touch the envelope. She knew what was inside. Cash, probably $10,000. It wasn't the first such token she had received from Greg or others like him. "The campaign fund is always grateful for support from community leaders," she said with a practiced smile. After Greg left, Jasmine locked the envelope in a special drawer in her desk. The money would never go to her official campaign. Instead, it would be routed through a series of accounts her friend Peter had set up. Peter Mason handled these transactions for several politicians. He called it creative finance. Jasmine's phone buzzed. It was a text from her old friend Cynthia Wallace. "Saw the news about the West Side project. Are you sure about this? People are asking questions." Jasmine frowned. Cynthia had been her roommate in college and knew her better than most. Unlike many of Jasmine's other relationships, this one wasn't based on political advantage. Cynthia was now a high school teacher and had no interest in politics, which made her both valuable and frustrating as a friend. "Everything's fine. Just doing my job," Jasmine texted back. 3 dots appeared as Cynthia typed her response. "Just be careful. This doesn't feel right." Jasmine put the phone down without replying. Cynthia didn't understand how the game was played. Few people did. Politics wasn't just about voting on bills and making speeches. It was about building a network, making deals, and sometimes looking the other way. The intercom buzzed again. "Ms. Crockett, your staff meeting starts in 5 minutes." "Thank you, I'll be right there," Jasmine replied. She gathered her notes and headed to the conference room where her team waited. 6 young faces looked up at her with admiration as she entered. Most were in their 20s, eager to learn from her and build their own political careers. "Good morning, everyone," Jasmine said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Let's start with the week's schedule." Her chief of staff, Brad Winters, began running through upcoming events, meetings, and votes. Jasmine half listened, her mind still on Greg's visit and Cynthia's warning. And finally, Brad said, pulling her attention back, J.D. Vance has confirmed for the televised debate next month on government ethics and transparency. Jasmine felt a small twinge of unease. J.D. Vance had been making a name for himself as an anti-corruption crusader. Unlike many politicians who used such platforms just for show, Vance seemed genuinely committed to his cause. He had already ended the careers of 2 state senators by exposing their backroom deals. "What's his angle?" Jasmine asked. "He doesn't seem to have one," Brad replied. "That's what makes him unusual. He goes after both parties equally." "Nobody is that clean," Jasmine said. "Dig deeper. Find something we can use if needed." The meeting continued, but Jasmine's mind was elsewhere. After her staff left, she walked to the window and looked out at the city below. People moved like ants along the streets, unaware of the deals being made in offices like hers that would shape their lives. Her phone rang. It was Peter Mason. "We need to talk," he said without greeting. "Not on the phone." "What's wrong?" Jasmine asked immediately. Concerned. "Nothing yet, but we should be careful. Meet me at the usual place at 7. The usual place was a small bar on the edge of town where politicians rarely went. Peter had chosen it years ago for exactly that reason. That evening, Jasmine arrived, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Peter was already at a corner table nursing a whiskey. "Someone's been asking questions," Peter said when she sat down. "About Sunrise Developments and the West Side Project?" Jasmine felt her heart rate increase. "Who?" "Not sure yet, but they've been requesting public records, looking at the money trail." "The money's clean," Jasmine insisted. "You said so yourself," Peter took a long sip of his drink. "Clean enough for normal scrutiny, but if someone digs deep enough." Across town, in a modest apartment filled with papers and open laptops, J.D. Vance was doing exactly that, digging. A former Marine and Yale law graduate, he had spent the last 3 years investigating government corruption. His walls were covered with photos, documents, and red string connecting various politicians to businesses and money flows. Tonight his focus was on Jasmine Crockett. 6 separate payments of $50,000 each had been made to a company called Blue Sky Consulting. On paper, Blue Sky provided strategic advice to Jasmine's campaign. But J.D. had discovered that Blue Sky was a shell company that led back to Peter Mason, and from there the money seemed to disappear. What interested J.D. most was the timing. Each payment had come shortly after Jasmine had helped push through a government decision that benefited Sunrise Developments, owned by Sam Rodriguez, a major donor to several political campaigns. J.D.'s phone rang. It was his researcher, Maria Lopez. "I found something," she said. "Emails between Crockett and Rodriguez. They tried to delete them, but the server backup had copies." "What do they say?" J.D. asked, already reaching for a pen. In one, Crockett writes, "No one can trace this back to us if we're careful." It's dated 3 days before the first payment to Blue Sky. J.D. smiled grimly. "That's what we needed. Good work." He added the new information to his wall, then stepped back to look at the full picture. The upcoming televised debate would be the perfect place to confront Jasmine Crockett with what he had found. Unlike private meetings that could be denied later, this would be live, in front of millions of viewers. "Time to play your cards, Congresswoman," J.D. said to the photo of Jasmine smiling at a campaign rally. "Let's see how well you do when the whole country is watching." Eric Johnson yawned as he poured his 3rd cup of coffee. The clock on his apartment wall showed 2:18 a.m., but sleep was the last thing on his mind. His living room had become a makeshift office, with papers spread across every surface. His laptop screen glowed in the dim light, showing financial records that most people would find boring. But Eric wasn't most people. For 15 years, Eric had worked as an investigative journalist. He had exposed corrupt mayors, dishonest business owners, and criminals who thought they were above the law. His apartment walls held framed copies of his biggest stories, along with the awards they had earned him. But this investigation might be his most important yet. 3 weeks ago, an unmarked envelope had arrived at his office. Inside was a USB drive and a note that simply read, "Follow the money." The drive contained partial financial records for several politicians, including Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. At first, Eric wasn't sure if the information was real or fake. But after checking the first few leads, he realized he had stumbled onto something big. Eric took a sip of coffee and looked at the diagram he had created on his wall. Red lines connected Jasmine to various companies and people. The pattern was becoming clear. Money flowed from businesses that received government contracts to shell companies, then to consultants, and finally to accounts that benefited Jasmine. Without appearing in her official records, his phone rang, unusual for this time of night. "Eric Johnson," he answered. "Mr. Johnson, this is Patricia Gomez." The woman's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Eric sat up straighter. Patricia was J.D., Vance's senior aide. They had spoken briefly once before. "Ms. Gomez, what can I do for you at this hour?" "I hear you're looking into Congresswoman Crockett," she said. "So are we. I think we should talk." "I'm listening," Eric replied, reaching for his notebook. "Not on the phone. Can you meet tomorrow?" "There's a coffee shop called Morning Brew on Oak Street. 10 a.m. "I'll be there," Eric said. After hanging up, Eric returned to his work with renewed energy. If J.D. Vance's team was investigating the same thing, it meant he was on the right track. Vance had built a reputation for exposing corruption, regardless of political party. His evidence was always solid, his accusations precise. The next morning, Eric arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. He chose a table in the corner where he could see the door. At exactly 10, Patricia Gomez walked in. She was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes scanned the room before settling on Eric. "Mr. Johnson," she said, sitting down across from him. "Thank you for meeting me." "What can I share, a journalist and a political aide?" Eric asked. Patricia placed a folder on the table. "Information. Mr. Vance believes in transparency. We know you're investigating Congresswoman Crockett. So are we. These are copies of some documents we've gathered." Eric opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, emails, and meeting notes. He whistled softly. "This is quite a collection," he said. "Why share it with me?" "Mr. Vance believes the public deserves to know the truth. Your newspaper reaches people we can't. But more importantly, we think you might have pieces of the puzzle we don't." Eric considered this. Journalists rarely shared sources or evidence before publishing a story. But this was different. The stakes were higher. "I might have some information that would interest you," he admitted. "But I need to know this isn't just a political attack. My paper won't publish a hit piece." "Mr. Vance has gone after corrupt politicians from both parties," Patricia reminded him. "This isn't about politics. It's about honesty in government." After an hour of careful conversation, they agreed to share certain findings. Eric revealed the connection between Blue Sky Consulting and Peter Mason. Patricia confirmed they had found the same link and added that Mason had connections to at least 3 other politicians under investigation. Back at his newspaper office, Eric met with his editor, Michelle Davis. A veteran journalist with 30 years of experience, Michelle had seen it all and was not easily impressed. "So you're working with J.D. Vance's team now?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Not working with them," Eric clarified. "Sharing some information. There's a difference." Michelle leaned back in her chair. "Be careful, Eric. Remember the Carson story?" Eric winced at the memory. 5 years ago, he had published a story about Senator William Carson's misuse of campaign funds. The evidence had seemed solid, but key documents turned out to be fake. The newspaper had to print a retraction, and Eric's reputation had taken years to rebuild. "I'm triple-checking everything," he assured her. "And I'm only using what I can. Verify independently." Michelle nodded. "Okay. How close are you to publishing?" "A week? Maybe 2. I still need to confirm the connection between Jasmine and Frank Miller." Frank Miller was a real estate developer who had won a major government contract shortly after making large donations to a charity connected to Jasmine's brother. On paper, Everything looked legal, but Eric suspected the charity was another way to funnel money to Jasmine. Across town, J.D. Vance sat in his office reviewing the same information. Unlike Eric's cluttered apartment, J.D.'s space was organized with military precision, a habit from his years as a Marine. 3 computer screens displayed different aspects of the investigation. "Patricia tells me you met with Johnson," said his colleague Ben Howard, entering the office. J.D. nodded without looking up. "He has good instincts, found most of the same trails we did with fewer resources." "Can we trust him?" "We're not trusting him," J.D. replied. "We're using each other. He wants a story. We want the truth public. Our goals align for now." Ben sat down across from J.D. "The debate is in 3 weeks. Will we be ready?" J.D. turned one of the screens toward Ben. It showed an email from Jasmine to Kevin Thompson, a local businessman. The message discussed a mutual arrangement regarding government contracts and campaign support. "We're ready now," J.D. said. "But I want everything perfect. No loose ends, no room for denial." Ben smiled. "She won't know what hit her." "This isn't about surprising her," J.D. corrected him. "It's about the truth. If Jasmine Crockett has nothing to hide, she has nothing to fear from me." But J.D. knew from experience that politicians like Jasmine always had something to hide. The question was whether she realized how much he had already uncovered. Meanwhile, Jasmine was growing increasingly nervous. Her meeting with Peter Mason had left her unsettled. If someone was investigating the West Side Project, they might find connections that could damage her career. "We need to clean things up," she told Peter during a late dinner at his house, away from listening ears. Peter nodded as he poured more wine. "I've already started. Blue Sky is being shut down. The paperwork will show it was a normal business closure due to lack of clients. And the money? Moved offshore, then back through different channels. By the time anyone follows the trail, it will lead nowhere." Jasmine wished she could feel reassured, but something told her it was too late. "What about the emails? The meetings?" "Deleted. As for meetings, unless someone was recording them, it's your word against theirs." Jasmine thought about the upcoming debate with J.D. Vance. Her staff had warned her about his thorough preparation and direct questioning style. Usually she enjoyed debates, using her charm and quick thinking to win over audiences. But facing someone known for exposing corruption made her uneasy. "I should never have agreed to the debate," she said. Peter shrugged. "Backing out now would look suspicious. Just stick to talking points. Deny anything you can't explain. Politicians do it all the time." What neither Jasmine nor Peter realized was that J.D. Vance already had copies of emails they thought were deleted, records of meetings they believed were private, and a paper trail of money flowing from businesses to Jasmine's hidden accounts. The trap was set, and in 3 weeks it would snap shut on live television for the whole country to see. The television studio buzzed with activity as technicians adjusted lights and sound equipment. Red, white, and blue banners hung on the wall behind a curved desk where 4 empty chairs waited for the debate participants. Camera operators moved into position while makeup artists made last-minute touches on the politicians waiting backstage. Stephanie Rogers checked her reflection in a compact mirror. At 52, she had been hosting political debates for over 20 years. Her reputation for tough but fair questioning had made her the network's first choice for tonight's government ethics debate. She closed the mirror and took a deep breath. Something in the air told her this would not be an ordinary night. In her private dressing room, Jasmine Crockett stood perfectly still as a stylist adjusted her hair. She had chosen a dark blue suit that projected authority and trustworthiness. 2 campaign advisors stood nearby, running through potential questions and answers. "If Vance brings up campaign finance, pivot to your bill on election reform," said Alan Porter, her debate coach. Jasmine nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. For the past week, she had felt increasingly uneasy. Peter Mason had assured her that everything was clean, all traces covered, but doubt lingered. Yesterday, she had tried calling Sam Rodriguez from Sunrise Developments, but he hadn't returned her calls. That wasn't like him. "5 minutes, Congresswoman," called a production assistant through the door. Down the hall, J.D. Vance sat quietly reviewing his notes. Unlike Jasmine, he had no team of advisors buzzing around him. Only Patricia Gomez sat nearby, organizing documents in a slim black folder. "Are you sure about this approach?" Patricia asked. "Going after her directly on live TV is risky." JD looked up from his notes. "The risk would be staying silent when I have evidence of corruption. The public deserves to know who they've elected." Patricia nodded. She had worked with JD long enough to understand his commitment to transparency wasn't just political positioning. He genuinely believed in it. A floor director appeared at the door. "We're ready for you, Mr. Vance." In living rooms across America, millions of viewers tuned into the debate. In a small apartment in Cleveland, retired teacher Gary Peterson and his wife Linda settled onto their couch with cups of tea. "I hope they actually answer questions tonight instead of just talking around them," Linda said. Gary shrugged. "Don't get your hopes up. These debates are usually just for show." The camera panned across the studio as dramatic music played. Stephanie Rogers smiled at the camera. "Good evening and welcome to National Policy Debate. Tonight, our topic is government ethics and transparency. Please welcome our participants." The camera moved to show 4 politicians walking onto the stage: Senator Mike Baldwin, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, State Representative Lisa Coleman, and JD Vance. They took their seats as polite applause filled the studio. "We'll begin with opening statements," Stephanie announced. "Senator Baldwin, you're first." Baldwin gave a standard speech about the importance of ethics in government. Lisa Coleman followed with similar remarks. When Jasmine's turn came, she spoke confidently about her record of supporting ethics legislation and the need for accountability. "As someone who came from humble beginnings," she said, "I understand the importance of public trust. People need to know their representatives are working for them, not special interests." JD Vance was last. His opening statement was brief and direct. "Ethics isn't just something we talk about, it's something we live by," he said. "Too often, politicians say the right things while doing the opposite. Tonight, I hope we can move beyond words to actions and accountability." The first 30 minutes of the debate covered familiar territory: campaign finance laws, lobbying regulations, and disclosure requirements. Jasmine performed well, drawing on her legal background to give detailed answers that impressed even her opponents. In the Peterson living room, Gary yawned. "Same old talking points. Nothing new here." But then Stephanie Rogers turned to a new topic. "Let's discuss specific examples of ethical challenges in government. Mr. Vance, you've made fighting corruption a central part of your work. Could you share some examples of what you found?" JD nodded. "Thank you, Stephanie. I believe specifics are important. We can talk about ethics in abstract terms all night, but what matters is how officials actually behave when they think no one is watching." He turned slightly toward Jasmine. "For instance, Congresswoman Crockett spoke eloquently about public trust. I agree that trust is essential. That's why I'd like to ask her about her relationship with Sunrise Developments and why she received 6 payments of $50,000 each after helping them secure the West Side project." The studio fell silent. Jasmine's smile froze on her face. Under the bright lights, viewers could see the color drain from her cheeks. The camera caught her expression perfectly, a mixture of shock and fear that was broadcast to millions of homes. I don't know what you're talking about," she managed to say. JD opened the black folder Patricia had prepared. "I have copies of bank records showing transfers from Sunrise Developments to Blue Sky Consulting, a company owned by your associate Peter Mason. From there, the money went to accounts that ultimately benefited you personally." Jasmine tried to regain her composure. That's a serious accusation without evidence. Blue Sky was a legitimate consulting firm that worked on my campaign." "Was?" JD noted. "Interesting that you use past tense. Blue Sky was dissolved 3 weeks ago, shortly after my office began investigating these connections." He turned to face her directly. "I also have meeting records showing you met with Sam Rodriguez of Sunrise Developments 12 times in the months before the contract was awarded. Yet you never disclosed these meetings in your official calendar. Sweat began to form on Jasmine's forehead despite the studio's air conditioning. The cameras caught every bead, every nervous twitch of her hands. In homes across America, viewers leaned forward. In the Peterson living room, Gary was suddenly wide awake. "Did you hear that?" he asked his wife. "This just got interesting." Stephanie Rogers, sensing the shift in the debate, tried to maintain control. "Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Jasmine straightened in her chair. "These are baseless accusations meant to damage my reputation. Mr. Vance is trying to create a scandal where none exists. Yes, I met with Mr. Rodriguez as I meet with many business leaders in my district. That's part of my job." JD nodded as if expecting this answer. "I understand the need to meet with constituents, but I'm curious why these particular meetings weren't in your public schedule. And perhaps you could explain this email." He held up a printed copy. "This is a message you sent to Mr. Rodriguez the day after the West Side project was approved. It reads, and I quote, 'Our arrangement worked out well. The usual payment method will be fine.'" Gasps came from the studio audience. Senator Baldwin and Representative Coleman exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly wanting to distance themselves from what was unfolding. Jasmine's mind raced. That email had been deleted. She was sure of it. How had Vance gotten it? She tried to remember what else she might have written that could now be in his hands. "That email is being taken completely out of context," she said, her voice rising slightly. "The arrangement referred to his agreement to speak at a community event. The payment was for the venue." JD looked unconvinced. "That's interesting because we have no record of Mr. Rodriguez speaking at any community events sponsored by your office in the following 6 months. What we do have is records of $50,000 moving from Sunrise Developments to Blue Sky Consulting exactly 1 week after this email was sent." The camera zoomed in on Jasmine's face as she struggled to find a response. In that moment, millions of viewers saw something they rarely witnessed in polished politicians: genuine panic. In her apartment across town, Cynthia Wallace watched in horror as her friend's career imploded on live television. She grabbed her phone and typed a quick message to Jasmine. "Call me when this is over. We'll figure something out." But as Cynthia watched JD Vance methodically present document after document, she knew there might not be a way out this time. Jasmine Crockett gripped the edges of the debate podium, trying to steady herself. The bright studio lights felt hotter than before, and sweat ran down her back. JD Vance continued his methodical presentation, his voice calm and matter-of-fact, making his accusations even more devastating. "I have here," JD said, holding up another document, "bank records showing that after each payment from Sunrise Developments to Blue Sky Consulting, a similar amount was transferred to Coastal Investments, a company registered in your brother-in-law's name. From there, the money funded renovations on your vacation home in Florida." Jasmine felt trapped. Each piece of evidence closed another escape route. She glanced at the other debate participants. Senator Baldwin and Representative Coleman had physically shifted their chairs slightly away from her, as if corruption might be contagious. "These are complicated financial matters being oversimplified for dramatic effect," Jasmine said, forcing confidence into her voice. "My family's investments are separate from my work as a congresswoman. Mr. Vance is connecting unrelated transactions to create a false narrative." JD nodded as if considering her point. "Perhaps you could explain why in this email dated March 12th, you wrote to Kevin Thompson, 'The West Side deal is moving forward. Once approved, we'll use the same payment structure as before. No one can trace this back to us if we're careful,'" the studio audience gasped. Even Stephanie Rogers, the veteran moderator, looked shocked. In television control rooms, producers were frantically telling their teams to stay with this story rather than cutting to commercial breaks. Ratings were spiking across the country, as viewers messaged friends and family to turn on the debate. In her apartment, Cynthia Wallace watched in horror, her hand covering her mouth. She knew Jasmine had cut corners, but she never imagined the extent of it. Her phone buzzed with messages from mutual friends, all asking variations of the same question. "Are you watching this?" Daniel Clark, Jasmine's attorney, was also watching. He immediately began making notes, preparing for what he knew would be a difficult legal battle ahead. As one of Washington's top defense lawyers, he had represented politicians in trouble before, but rarely had he seen such damning evidence presented so publicly. Back in the studio, Jasmine attempted to regain control. That email has clearly been altered. I demand to see the original. The original is with the Justice Department, JD replied calmly. I submitted all evidence to them yesterday morning, but I'm happy to share these copies with you and the network after the debate. This news hit Jasmine like a physical blow. The Justice Department was already involved. This wasn't just a political attack, it was potentially a criminal investigation. Stephanie Rogers, sensing the gravity of the situation, tried to bring some order back to the debate. Mr. Vance, these are serious allegations. Congressman Crockett deserves the opportunity to review this evidence before responding further. I agree completely, JD said. But the American people also deserve to know how their representatives behave when they think no one is watching. This isn't about politics. Senator Baldwin and I disagree on many policies, but I've never questioned his integrity. This is about basic honesty in government. The camera cut to Senator Baldwin, who nodded appreciatively at the distinction. No politician wanted to be associated with corruption, even one from the same party as Jasmine. Jasmine's mind raced through her options. Denial wasn't working. The evidence was too specific, too detailed. She could try to discredit JD, suggest he had political motivations, but his reputation for going after corruption in both parties made that difficult. She needed time to consult with her lawyer, to craft a careful response. I believe in due process, she said finally. These accusations should be addressed in the proper forum, not trial by television. I'm happy to answer any questions after I've had the opportunity to review the alleged evidence. JD looked directly at her. Due process is important. That's why I've turned everything over to the proper authorities. But transparency is also important. The public has a right to know. Across the country, social media was exploding with video, clips from the debate. The hashtag #DosserCrockettCrimes was trending nationwide. Political commentators on every network were breaking into regular programming to discuss what many were calling the most dramatic political confrontation in recent memory. In her office, Olivia Bennett, a popular political blogger, was already writing an analysis. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. What we witnessed tonight wasn't just the unraveling of a political career, but a rare moment of accountability in a system that often protects its own. The debate continued for another 30 minutes, but Jasmine was effectively sidelined. When asked about other topics, she gave brief, distracted answers. The confident, charismatic politician from the beginning of the evening was gone, replaced by someone visibly shaken and uncertain. As the debate concluded, reporters swarmed the stage. Jasmine pushed past them without comment, heading straight for the exit where her chief of staff, Brad Winters, waited with a grim expression. Cars out back, he said quietly. No statements tonight. They slipped out a side door, avoiding most of the press, but not the shouted questions that followed them. Congresswoman, will you resign? Did you accept bribes from Sunrise Developments? Have you spoken to the Justice Department? Inside the car, Jasmine finally broke down. How did he get those emails? They were deleted. Peter assured me everything was clean. Brad looked uncomfortable. Someone on the inside must have leaked them. Maybe someone at Sunrise kept copies or one of Peter's associates turned on him. We need to call Daniel, Jasmine said, referring to her attorney. And Peter. We need to get our story straight before the Justice Department contacts us. Brad hesitated. Peter's not answering his phone. No one has heard from him since this afternoon. This news hit Jasmine hard. Peter Mason was not the type to disappear, especially in a crisis, unless he was cutting ties, saving himself. The thought made her stomach churn. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance was holding an impromptu press conference in the studio lobby. Reporters pressed. Around him, recording devices extended. I want to be clear that this isn't about politics, J.D. said. This is about upholding the public trust. The evidence suggests that Congresswoman Crockett used her position to enrich herself and her associates. The Justice Department will now determine if criminal charges are appropriate. A reporter pushed forward. Do you have evidence against other politicians? JD's expression remained neutral. My office investigates corruption wherever we find it, regardless of party affiliation. That work continues. Back at her apartment, Jasmine paced while Daniel Clark reviewed the situation. He had arrived minutes after she called, carrying a legal pad and a grave expression. If they have the emails and financial records JD mentioned, this is serious, Daniel said. We need to know exactly what the Justice Department has. Can we claim the emails were fake or taken out of context? Jasmine asked. Daniel shook his head. Not if they have the server records. And from what you've told me about the financial transactions, there's a clear pattern. Our best option might be to negotiate. Negotiate what? A plea deal. Minimize the charges, possibly avoid jail time. Jasmine collapsed onto her couch. This can't be happening, everything I've worked for. Her phone buzzed with a text from Cynthia. I'm here if you need me. At least one person still stood by her. But for how long? Once the full story came out, would even Cynthia understand? Across town, Eric Johnson was putting the finishing touches on his newspaper article. The headline read, Corruption Exposed. Congresswoman Crockett's Secret Deals Revealed. The story would run in tomorrow's paper with additional details not covered in the debate. His editor had given him the front page. In homes across America, the debate was being replayed and analyzed. Political careers had ended before, but rarely with such public drama. The image of Jasmine's panicked face had already become a symbol of political corruption caught in the act. The unraveling had begun and there was no stopping it now. 3 months passed since the debate that changed everything. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in Jasmine Crockett's apartment as she sipped coffee and stared at the newspaper on her kitchen table. Her face was on the front page again, but this time the headline read, Former Congresswoman accepts plea deal in corruption case. Jasmine looked older now. The stress of the investigation had left lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. Her designer clothes hung in the closet unworn, replaced by simple jeans and sweaters. The polished politician was gone. Her phone rang. It was Daniel Clark, her attorney. Have you seen the papers? He asked. Yes, Jasmine replied. They got most of the details right for once. The terms are as good as we could hope for, Daniel said. 5 counts of campaign finance violations, 2 counts of bribery, 3 years probation, no jail time as long as you cooperate with the ongoing investigation. Jasmine knew she was lucky. The evidence against her had been overwhelming. Without Daniel's skilled negotiation, she might have faced years in prison. The plea deal required her to testify against others involved in the corruption scheme, including Sam Rodriguez and several other business owners who had paid for political favors. What about Peter? She asked. Daniel's voice turned grim. Still missing. The FBI has a warrant out for him, but he seems to have left the country. His accounts in the Cayman Islands were emptied 2 days after the debate, so Peter had known what was coming and prepared his escape. Jasmine felt a flash of anger. Peter had been her advisor, the one who assured her their schemes were untraceable. Now he was gone, probably living comfortably somewhere without extradition, while she faced the consequences. After hanging up, Jasmine walked to her living room window. Reporters no longer camped outside her building, having moved on to newer scandals. But her neighbors still gave her cold looks in the elevator. Everyone had seen the debate, watched her panic as J.D. Vance methodically exposed her crimes on national television. The moment had been replayed countless times, analyzed by political pundits, even parodied on comedy shows. Her resignation from Congress had come 1 week after the debate, following immense pressure from her own party leaders. They had once celebrated her as a rising star. Now they pretended they barely knew her. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text message. It was Cynthia. Coffee at 2? The usual place? Cynthia Wallace was one of the few people who still spoke to Jasmine. While others had abandoned her, Cynthia had remained loyal, not excusing what Jasmine had done but refusing to abandon their friendship. See you then, Jasmine texted back. Across town in his modest office, J.D. Vance reviewed files for his next investigation. The Crockett case had raised his profile nationally. Some political leaders now feared him, while others sought his endorsement as proof of their own integrity. He had received job offers from major law firms promising salaries 10 times what he currently earned. He had declined them all. Patricia Gomez entered with a stack of papers. The Justice Department sent their thanks for the Rodriguez file. They're moving forward with charges against 3 more businessmen connected to the case. J.D. nodded. Good. Corruption works because both sides benefit. We need to hold everyone accountable, not just the politicians. There's something else, Patricia said, placing a newspaper on his desk. It was opened to an editorial cartoon showing J.D. as a knight slaying a dragon labeled corruption. The artist had captured his determined expression perfectly. J.D. smiled. Slightly. A bit dramatic, don't you think? People need heroes, Patricia replied. Especially in politics. J.D.'s phone rang. It was Eric Johnson from the newspaper. Have you seen my latest article? Eric asked after they exchanged greetings. About the plea deal? Yes, good work, thanks. Listen, I'm working on a follow-up piece about the systemic issues that allow this kind of corruption to happen. Any chance you'd agree to an interview? J.D. considered this. He typically avoided publicity, preferring to let his work speak for itself. But changing the system required public awareness. Send me the questions in advance, he agreed. And no personal stuff. Focus on the issues. At 2 o'clock, Jasmine sat in a corner table at a small cafe, far from the upscale restaurants she used to frequent. Few people here recognized her, which was exactly why she chose it. Cynthia arrived a few minutes late, rushing in from her teaching job. The 2 women hugged before sitting down. How are you holding up? Cynthia asked. Jasmine shrugged. Taking it day by day. The media attention is finally dying down. I'm thinking about moving, starting over somewhere new. Have you decided what you'll do next? It was a question Jasmine had been asking herself for months. Her law license was under review by the State Bar Association. Her political career was over. Her savings, once substantial, had been mostly spent on legal fees. I've been offered a position with a nonprofit that works on prison reform, Jasmine said. The irony isn't lost on me. Cynthia smiled. You know what they say, the best advocates are often those who've seen the system from the inside. I haven't accepted yet, Jasmine admitted. Part of me just wants to disappear, change my name, become someone else. You can't run from who you are, Cynthia said gently. Maybe it's better to face it, use your experience to do something good. As they talked, a group of college students at a nearby table were having an animated discussion about politics. One of them mentioned J.D. Vance's name, calling him the only honest person in Washington. They didn't notice Jasmine sitting just a few feet away, the woman whose career he had ended. Later that afternoon, William Harris stood in front of the community center in Jasmine's former district. Once her strong supporter, he had organized voters, raised money, and believed in her promises to help their neighborhood. Now he led a community meeting to discuss what they wanted from their next representative. We were fooled once, he told the gathering of concerned citizens. We can't let that happen again. We need to look deeper, ask tougher questions, demand real transparency. The crowd nodded in agreement. Jasmine's betrayal had left them wary but also more engaged. Attendance at community meetings had doubled since the scandal broke. That evening, J.D. Vance sat for his interview with Eric Johnson. They met at a quiet restaurant after the dinner rush, away from curious ears. What drives you to do this work? Eric asked after they had covered the technical aspects of corruption investigations. You could make much more money in private practice. J.D. considered the question. My grandmother raised me in a small town in Ohio. She cleaned houses for wealthy families, including some local politicians. I saw how they lived, how they used their positions for personal gain while people like my grandmother struggled. I promised myself I would do something about it if I ever had the chance. And the risks? You've made powerful enemies. J.D. shrugged. There are worse things than having powerful enemies. like becoming someone who looks the other way. As the interview concluded, Eric asked one final question. What's next? There are rumors you might run for office yourself. JD smiled but didn't answer directly. There's still plenty of work to do right where I am. The next morning, Jasmine stood in front of the courthouse for her final hearing. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, no makeup. This wasn't a performance, those days were over. As she walked up the steps, she saw a familiar face in the crowd. It was Helen Martinez, an elderly woman who had volunteered on Jasmine's first campaign. Their eyes met briefly. There was no anger. In Helen's gaze, just disappointment, which somehow felt worse. Jasmine turned away and continued up the steps. The heavy doors swung open before her. Whatever happened next, whatever life she built from the ruins of her former self, it would begin with facing the truth of what she had done. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending. That life was over, exposed on live television by a man who believed in something she had forgotten long ago. That public service should be about serving the public, not yourself. Inside the courtroom, Jasmine Crockett took her seat at the defendant's table, ready at last to face the consequences of her choices.